day to everybody, and we want to welcome you to another episode of Meet Me in the Breakroom. We are honored and privileged to have Dr. Phelton Moss with us here today. Phelton, welcome to Meet Me in the Breakroom.
Thank you for having me, Pastor. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Listen, I wanted to have a conversation about education, and I call you the education guru.
I know about it.
So this is Dr. Moss, recently got his doctorate from the University of Mississippi. But Phelton, just for those who may not know you yet, tell us a little bit about your educational journey and just the things that you've already accomplished in your short few years of life.
Yeah, well, I started out, Pastor, as a high school English teacher in Greenwood. And then I became a high school assistant principal.
Okay.
And then I was a middle school turnaround principal in Marks, Mississippi.
Okay.
So a team of us went there and worked with a school that had been failing for quite some time. And we worked together to collectively move our school to successful. And then after that, I went to work for the state superintendent, leading all of our teacher and principal evaluation work, all of our teacher recruitment and retention work at the Department of Education. So that's what I've been doing the last 8 years, having fun, trying to think deeply about how do we give all kids an excellent education.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I really love about you. I mean, when I think about you, I think about passion and excellence in education. And pretty much because that's your passion, it comes out in everything you do. Most of your conversations, it's going to point back to giving children a quality education. And so kind of where does your love for learning and your passion for teachers and students alike, where does that come from? Was it a particular person who influenced you as you came up? Was it a horrible school experience? Because normally it comes from either a really great one or a really bad one, but tell us a little bit about how you knew this was God's calling for your life.
Yeah, so fortunately I had a good experience coming up as a child in school. I've just been blessed to have such a good experience, but my grandmother was a teacher for 47 years. So I was forced to grade papers for her or travel with her to make home visits when she would go visit homes. Never really wanted to be a teacher. I guess I used to teach kids on the back step, as my grandmother would say, but I really got into education through policy. I really like policy, and I always had questions about why some kids had and why some didn't. Right. And it just really led me to education. But I guess it would be my grandmother. She made me do everything with her. I don't think she ever graded papers. I think I was the person that graded all the papers.
Okay. Well, I know she was glad to see you move in that direction then. I'm sure very supportive of it.
Absolutely. Except becoming a principal. She wanted me to stay a teacher the rest of my life. So.
Okay. Well, the question on everybody's minds right now is, where are we with school openings? And I mean, right now, this information is so fluid. It is literally changing from day to day, district by district. And so let's just talk about where we are right now. Now, this particular episode is probably going to air about a week from now. So it may have even changed by the time we get to next Tuesday. But where are we with school openings right now?
Pastor, I think you characterized it right. We're all over the place with school openings. So one of the things that we have been fortunate with our state is our state took a district by district approach. Okay. And so districts had a phase or window opportunity where they had to put together a plan and say, this is how we're going to teach children. This is how we're going to ensure they learn. And so what we've seen across the state is some folks went to a full virtual model that's hybrid here in Jackson. Our schools are hybrid to December. Okay. And that plan was submitted to the DOE for approval. They've not gotten approval on that plan. No school district have gotten approval. We just heard the governor say he had read those plans and was going to issue some guidance to support districts. We have some districts who have kids in school now. Just in car rent down on the coast, we have that are back. And then we have some school districts who have kindergartners through third grade back and 4 through 12 are at home. So we are really at a place where it's piecemeal, if you will, where everybody is doing their own thing and doing what they believe that works for them. And it's really unfortunate that everyone is doing their own thing, because the least of these, as we would call, often gets left out in that conversation.
Right. So let's just go into what some of those bigger concerns are as it relates to school reopenings. One thing I try to do as a leader is look at things from every person's point of view. So let's kind of talk about concerns from the children and parents' points of view. Let's look at concerns from the teachers' points of view. And then let's look at what school administrators, superintendents, what they're looking at. So let's...
Absolutely. I'll start with parents.
Okay.
And Pastor, this is something we probably talked about, is the way that our education system is currently designed. It does not work for parents. We have a very 1950s agrarian schedule, if you will, that we start this time, and we start in August or September, if you will.
Right.
And it's very monolithic across the board, and it just does not work for our environment. In addition, when we have a 9-to-5 work day, it's really hard for parents to figure out how to educate their children. So one of the biggest concerns that parents are facing right now is, even in this hybrid model, what are they going to do with their kids long as their employer is asking them to come back to work? Right. Particularly kindergarten through third grade.
So let's very quickly, just for those who are kind of all over the place on these conversations. So there's basically kind of three options. There's the virtual option, which is all computer technology based. Then there's a hybrid model, which would have people having some at-home learning, some in-person learning at school, and then there's just full in-person return. So right now, the options being discussed is really, well, there's all three based on what district you're living in. Absolutely. So let's go back to... And
there's a fourth option that folks don't want to talk about, but there's a model for hybrid where we could put a teacher in the classroom and leave the children at home.
Gotcha.
And the teacher is instructing from his or her classroom.
Okay, gotcha.
But there's some health risk associated with that as well.
Sure.
But I think every school district has put out a menu of options in the way. And then even when you talk about virtual learning, people haven't separated for parents, which is what I've been trying to get people to think about. We have something called synchronous learning, and we have something called asynchronous learning.
Okay.
And synchronous is really when the teacher is actually facilitating it and communicating it live. Asynchronous learning is like your typical college course that you never meet the professor, you just talk to them online. And so I've been telling school districts that we actually have to have asynchronous and synchronous options. If I have poor internet at home, it's probably better for me to have an asynchronous option where I can just watch a video on my time rather than I have to sit there and get on a Zoom and my internet may crash. So we really got to think about asynchronous and synchronous learning for parents too.
Okay. Very good. And for those children who may not have technology in the home, I think sometimes we make assumptions that there is technology in every home, but that's really not the case. And so for those children who maybe have no Wi-Fi, or those who have weak Wi-Fi, I know there's some people, it's great when the sun is shining, but the moment it's cloudy or begins to rain, it's a completely different scenario. So we know in Mississippi, we have our share of some of everything. So,
Absolutely.
What does that look like for a child if the teacher is teaching, but the child's system crashes? How do they catch up? How do they get what they missed? Those kinds of things.
Yes, actually, absolutely great question. This is why I've been pushing for asynchronous learning. So the teacher record the video, upload it, and a kid can watch it whenever. If their internet crashes, they can watch it whenever. But I think you even get to a deeper issue, Pastor, around what if I do not have internet access? And my fear is that they're going to get these packets and never have anybody to work with them. But thankfully, we've had... C-Spire and AT&T have been putting their heads together, and they're beginning to put cell phone towers in parking lots all around the state. We have about 58 sites where we have internet in parking lots. But the point also around devices, our state superintendent has worked with the legislature to buy every kid a device in the state.
Okay.
The issue now is around how can we order enough devices for every child?
Right. And how soon can we get them?
Because
basically everybody in the nation is probably trying to place an order.
Absolutely.
If they didn't already have that in place.
Absolutely. But one of the opportunities that exists there is we got to figure out how to educate children with a cell phone too.
Right. Absolutely.
Because every child knows how to use a cell phone. So if all the programs that schools use can do it on a cell phone, I think that'll be helpful.
So what about those parents who they're being given these options? Hybrid, virtual only, in person. What do we want to say to those parents who are struggling, who have the opportunity, number one, to choose which form their child accesses for this particular semester. But what do we want to say to those parents who are struggling to know what's the right thing, what's the best thing for my child for where we are right now?
Absolutely. I think it's a tough one size answer, but I told my brother, I told my cousins, I've told my family, they said, well, Cortez, what do? We don't, we don't know what to do. We know our child needs to be educated.
Sure.
And then I have to go to work every day.
Right.
And so how do we figure that out?
And we know there's already a gap because they've been out since March, and we know children tend to lose quite a bit just during those summer months. So they've had a much longer, I won't say a vacation because they were still doing virtual from March to May, but it's not the same as they are used to. And so there's been a longer time out of the classroom, a longer time without their friends, a longer time without one-on-one help from their teachers. So, let's talk about all that.
Pastor thinks about this better than educators do. But I think one of the things that I've been telling parents is first of all, we got to make a decision that's good for you and your family.
Right.
I had a family yesterday who on the Facebook page was talking about this. She has a second grader. Mm-hmm. They can actually afford to have a tutor.
Sure.
That they can bring in, and so they've chosen to leave their child at home.
Okay.
And be able to do that, and that's what works for them. Mm-hmm. For those families who are less fortunate, don't have that, what I started calling on, I know you thought about this, and I called on it because you thought about it originally, is that we have to figure out how to build little community partnerships to help one another educate our children. Really back to the old system of education, where we start building little communities to educate our children. I've also wondered if we still had community schools. Yeah. Could we have actually opened a little bit more now rather than these large campuses that we always have? Mm-hmm. But I tell parents, make the best decision for you.
Sure.
There are some options out there to keep you from getting in trouble for not sending your child to school. Mm-hmm. The homeschool paperwork process is not difficult. You can reach out to your school district and opt to homeschool your child so that you are not penalized for days missed. Because once a child missed so many days, you can go to jail.
That's right.
And so I encourage folks that if you are going to bucket and not put your child in either one of the options, do the homeschool paperwork. There are faith-based schools that are still opening and running and have protected their spaces with smaller numbers. Pursue those. Some teachers are actually finding ways to help their kids at home that they taught the previous year. So reaching out to teachers. But the biggest thing that I can say to parents is make the best decision for you and your family. You have an older mom in the home or an older father in the home. I would not send my child to school, right? Because when you bring them home, it's going to happen. But here's also what I want to say. It's okay for us to slow down.
Sure.
You and I talked about this yesterday. School doesn't have to start in August.
Right. That's what we were laughing about too, because when I was young, which has been many years back, we didn't start school until after Labor Day. So we typically got out the very end of May or the first week of June. And so we were out the majority of June, all of July, all of August, and we came back after Labor Day. And, I don't think we suffered for it. We got out during Christmas, we got spring break, and I don't think we suffered for it.
I think we know this as believers more than anything is that, we don't have to hang on to these structures, right? We don't have to go to school for 180 days. We don't have to start in August. We don't have to go to school for 5 days a week. Yeah. We do not. I really think one of the things that, us as believers can start praying for is that, we actually take this opportunity to design the school that he wants for us in this time.
Absolutely.
Because we have a very antiquated school system that's based off a bunch of rules and regs, and everybody doesn't benefit from it.
Right.
And so I really think we could actually take an opportunity to step back and really figure out what's best. My mom and my brother, we were talking about, he says, I may not want to send my child back to that school anymore. If there are other options, if we can find a better way to educate, if we can find a faith-based curriculum that brings all of it together. I know we do that here at JRC.
Absolutely.
We just have a unique opportunity to rethink schools. And so what I want to share with parents is, if you choose to keep your child at home, it is okay. School doesn't have to start in September. Right. I mean, in August, it can actually start in September. So.
And then I've had conversations with parents who don't want to send their children back to school, but they do not have an option. The child's too young to stay home alone, and they don't have family around, and have not identified someone who, they would feel comfortable leaving their child with. So they're like, I've got to send my child somewhere. So, I want to be clear that for those parents that they're not feeling horrible about it, because at the end of the day, each family's got to do what they've got to do, making the right choices for them. But I think it's great to empower the families with the information they need so that they can navigate this time, and I think people have to be careful not to put so much pressure on themselves, because we've never been in a time like we're in right now. Mm-hmm. So it's new for parents, it's new for teachers, it's new for administrators, it's certainly new for the students, and so with us being somewhere we've never been before, talking about the opportunity we have to do something we've never done before, to think outside the box, what would you say is the future of schooling?
Yeah. Pastor, I'm so glad you talked about this being out of the box. For the first time, we've gotten rid of testing. A teacher no longer has to take the praxis. The ACT has been suspended to get into college. You don't need the GRE to get in graduate school. People are really rethinking. We've built our entire education system around these tests that no longer exist. So we do have the opportunity to slow down. When I think about the future of education, I think many folks will keep a virtual option. Some folks will never send their children back to school. But I think I spoke about it a little bit earlier. I think we'll get back to a very community orientation for schools. I think you're going to see more faith-based schools come up where folks are going to start figuring out, I actually can educate my child the way that I want to.
Right. Not have them so indoctrinated with things that are not congruent with your beliefs.
Absolutely. I tell people all the time, Catholics have done this well. There are so many Catholic schools around. So I really think the future of education will be a virtual hybrid option. But I also think that parents would make more choices to educate their child in the way that they want to. We've had an education system where you got to send your child to the school that's zoned in your neighborhood for so long.
Right.
And so I think we will start seeing a change in that.
Which really means, too, every child is not receiving equal access to the same thing.
Particularly when we fund schools based on property taxes. And so long as we continue to fund schools based on property taxes, you're going to have the haves and the have-nots. And this disequal system that we have has created so much inequity in our society. And honestly, it's being elevated now. We are seeing that day by day. And organizations like our church or other organizations are having to figure out how to hold up the other end of the bar. And pass out food and do all of these things. And it all started because we fund schools based on property taxes.
Right. So what are some things for those people who are watching, other churches who are watching, other community organizations, how can we really come around families? How can we come around our teachers within our church, our school districts, and really offer some real support during this time?
Well, what I want to say is what I've seen in Jackson has been remarkable from our community-based organizations, our faith-based organizations, and how they begin to really wrap around. I think the step that we can take is begin creating spaces for these parents that you talk so much about, who don't have a place for their child, but they got to go to work. We really got to build some spaces for that, particularly kindergarten through third grade. And I say that because that's when we learn our foundational skills. I cannot see a kindergarten, first, second, or third grade teacher teaching letter sounds, diphthongs, digraphs virtually. And so we really got to figure out how to do that. And I think our faith-based organizations can take their large community centers and say, look, we're going to have a schedule. We're going to put laptops in here, computers in here, exactly what you talked about, doing what you're already doing. It's not talking about what you're already doing. If we can do that on a larger scale, right? And every church was doing that, we could really help our parents do that. I think secondly, what keeps me up at night is that many students only get their meal from school. And so I think there are opportunities that will come about really soon as a result of COVID-19 for more organizations to apply to be a food site. And so I think organizations and churches need to set themselves up and make themselves available to take on that task of being able to be a food site for children and families, and be able to do that. And I think thirdly, what our faith-based community has always done is that we got to assure people that we're going to be okay.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that, God ultimately has the final say in this.
Absolutely.
And so I just think those are three things that we really can do to help people. First, that really creating that space.
Yeah.
For the single mom who has 3 kids, that if she doesn't go to work, she's not going to be able to feed them. We got to have somewhere for her child to go.
That's right.
That's safe.
Yes. And that's something that we're working on. So we have Little Ambassadors Developmental Learning Center. We go up through 5-year-old kindergarten. But we've got accreditation to go a little higher. And so what we're looking to do is provide a space for school-age children, elementary, to be able to come, be able to, stay connected to their school, receive their work, their packets, but have a certified teacher there for one-on-one tutoring, explanation, to make sure. But it's a much smaller setting. They're still getting breakfast, still getting lunch, still getting afternoon snack, and getting that help with homework. Wherever we have identified areas of deficiency or weakness, we can strengthen them in those areas. And so this is just one of the things we can do, but if every church could do it, our people already have background checks, things of that nature, so we're already kind of plugged in. But those things definitely, I think, make the difference at this point. We're also going to provide all of the members of Jackson Revival Center who are teachers with gift cards to be able to buy needed supplies for teaching, whether it be from their classroom or virtually, because from what I understand, they're not really getting an allotment for supplies.
Yeah. So and that card does not come to later in the year.
Yeah.
So teachers do get an EF card, but I'm glad you brought up teachers.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we can do for teachers too is just send them affirmation notes.
Absolutely.
And for parents not to we can also treat teachers better too.
Yes.
I think that's big. If I can say that to our parents, is give teachers grace.
Yeah. And look, and I think a lot of parents have that now from helping to homeschool. Later this past spring, I saw parents posting all over social media, my child is not a joy to have in class, and teachers need a raise. I think people finally began to understand. And of course, a lot of that was said in gesture and in fun.
Absolutely.
But I do think people really began to gain a newfound appreciation for teachers and the hard work that they put in day after day, the sacrifice, the love, the patience, because it takes that to work, especially with a group of children, different backgrounds, different strengths, different weaknesses, different home situations. Everybody's home situation may not be great, and that's another thing I think that sometimes people fail to take into consideration too. You never know. A child may be trying to engage in virtual learning, but there could be domestic violence going on in the background. There could be, so we just never know what their at-home situation really is. And so all that has to be taken into consideration when we're looking at their progress.
And one of the things I also, and I know we're getting pressed time for here, one of the things I'm concerned about is when a child's on a Zoom, and you just brought this up about if there's something else going on, but what if the condition of my house, doesn't look as if my peer, who may have a well-built home, and I may be living in an apartment or furniture is different, that creates an anxiety of getting on that space.
Because now all my friends are seeing my house, my teachers seeing my house, and if I don't feel good about my house, I don't feel good about me.
Absolutely.
I don't feel good about me in your presence. So yeah, that's a whole lot. That's a whole
putting
lot.
poverty on display.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, there's lots of things to be considered. I want to thank you so much for your time, for your input. It's invaluable, and I feel like parents have been given a lot of things to consider, and certainly we're keeping all of the administrators in our prayers, superintendents, principals, teachers, everybody, because this is a time certainly unlike any other.
Absolutely.
But thank God, God is faithful. He'll never leave us, never forsake us, go with us all of the way. And so I'm with you. I believe that this is a time to rethink, think outside the box, restructure, and keep pushing forward. Amen. Well, thank you. Do you have anything else you want to say in closing?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I've also just been really appreciative of the thinking that our church has been doing to support schools.
Well, thank you.
And hearing the plans that we have for creating spaces, supporting teachers. If we could get every church to do that in our community, it would be really beautiful for our kids and teachers and leaders, and just for the kingdom of God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today.
Amen.
We want to thank each and every one of you for joining us, for meeting us in the break room. And if you have enjoyed the dialogue and you're receiving great information, please share this with a friend, invite your family, and meet us again next week, same time, same station. Until then, we pray God's absolute best be yours in every area of your life. Make today a great day.